I watched Hanukkah 2025 via the Menorah watch season. And in the same way, I'm going to be watching April 2026 via what I'm going to call the April watch season simply because Feast of Unleavened Bread watch season is hard to say. So here we have Nisan 15 through 21, that's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, on the Hebrew calendar as commonly reckoned, but the biblical month begins with the full moon. So we would also need a Nisan 15 through Nisan 21 on that reckoning based on the full moon. So that's what we have here. The total system is 7 plus 7 plus 7 days, which is pretty cool. It is centered on the Hebrew day that begins at sundown on April 11 and spans all the way to sundown April 12. So I expect that centerpiece to be a real collector of symbolism. Not that it is necessarily a high watch day for the Rapture. Of course, you know, as I said in my last video, I'm especially watching Nisan 16 and 17. And I'll first watch Nisan 16 and 17 as commonly reckoned, and then I'm going to watch Nisan 16 and 17 as reckoned on the biblical month, if necessary. So I'm going to end this video with a clip where I explain why I believe that the biblical month begins with the full moon, and I hope you enjoy. God bless. So, if we're looking for the rapture, we should probably understand how the Bible reckons a month, right? And of course, there's two options. Either the lunar conjunction, the dark phase of the moon, begins the month, or the full moon is the beginning of the month. And in either case, the biblical term new moon would refer either to the full moon or to the lunar conjunction, depending on what we decide. And it turns out that the Bible answers this question very clearly in Psalm 81:3. Multiple versions basically say the same thing. Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon, on our solemn feast day. So this is clearly one day on which you're going to blow the trumpet, and it's called both the new moon and the full moon. So that was New King James Version. ESV says blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, on our feast day. RSV says blow the trumpet at the new moon, at the full moon, on our feast day. So new moon is full moon, according to the Bible. And of course, the Bible says some things that seem to say what they don't actually mean. I get that. But we're going to look at Genesis 1, and you're going to see this again. So Genesis 1 confirms what the Bible plainly says. And on the other hand, if you're looking for a verse that says that the dark phase of the moon begins the month, there's no comparable verse that says that anywhere. Okay, so let's get to the main biblical proof that the month begins with a full moon, and that would be found in Genesis 1. There we see what God created the moon to do. He created the moon for a purpose, and that purpose was to, number one, give light on the earth, and number two, to rule the night. So, where, in relation to the sun and the earth, do you think God created the moon? He created it on the night side of the earth, when full sunlight would be illuminating the earth-facing side of the moon. He did not create the moon on the day side such that the moon would be dark, because the moon was created to give light on the earth and to rule the night. So it should be very clear that the original new moon, when God originally created it, which began the very first month, was full. And so God's perspective on what is the beginning of a month, it's a full moon. Okay, to get to my personal confirmation of this understanding, I'm going to review yet again my 6936 vision. I've mentioned this in multiple posts, multiple videos before. Just going to briefly state what it was. God gave me a waking vision, my one and only waking vision, in which I first saw a very powerful, energetic 69. It was much more emphasized than what I saw next, which was a 36. And that was it. 69, 36. 69 was clearly more important than 36 in this vision. And this was given to me on August 26, 2023. But long before that is the part of my testimony I want to talk about. This is where I met my wife and was told by God to try to marry her. This happened in March of 2015. March 6th is when I first met her online. And then about 7 days later, on March 13, late morning, I remember exactly where I was when this happened. God nudged me and said, Devin, try to marry this girl. And it was very clear. So I knew that if she would accept, she would be my wife. Now, what I've recently realized is that it's not a coincidence that March 6 is 3-6. That's one of those numbers in the vision. And when I checked to see, okay, March 13, what date was that according to the biblical Hebrew calendar, where the full moon is the new moon? And what I found is that God had nudged me to try to marry my wife right at the beginning of the date Adar 9. And Adar is the 6th month on the civil Hebrew calendar, so that would be 6-9. That's astounding, guys. That alone confirms that God's perspective of the biblical Hebrew month is beginning with a full moon. But it gets much better because then 6,936 hours after I met my wife was the day that my wife moved in with me. And 6,936 hours after God told me to marry her, I actually got married to her in my central Maine wedding. That's just incredible, guys. But it gets even better because the day that she moved in with me, according to the biblical Hebrew month, was Kislev 25, the first day of Hanukkah every year. And the day of our main wedding, we had actually 3 weddings at different times, but the central wedding, the main wedding, the one that we've always celebrated the most in terms of an anniversary, was December 27. That was Tevet too, on the biblical Hebrew calendar, the very last day of Hanukkah. So what I'm seeing here is that God is looking at a month as beginning with a full moon, extending all the way through to the next full moon. And he's counting Hebrew days based on that.